A person's wisdom yields patience. It is to one's glory to overlook an offense. Good morning, family of God. I come to you today from Proverbs 19, verse 11, where the wise man is speaking counsel to all those who dare to read and embrace and soak in the words of a man who'd been through so many trials and learned so many lessons that they just poured out of his spirit, that he just put them in a book called Proverbs, that we may grow from his sayings. He writes things in parables. Some are very literal, but he writes most of Proverbs in parables so that anyone in any situation can read Proverbs at any particular point of their life when they're going through anything. They can take something from it and apply it to what they're doing. He says here simply that a person's wisdom yields patience. Man, have you ever seen a wise man that is not patient? It's amazing to me that all of the wise people that I've ever talked to, all the ones I've ever interacted with or watched for any length of time, was one thing that they've always had, and that one thing is patience. Patience. The wise man simply says that a person's wisdom yields patience. Could it be that wisdom produces patience? When was the last time that you would have, one, called yourself wise, and number two, considered yourself to be a patient individual? Man, like I was saying, I've watched so many folk who are wise, and the one characteristic, boy, that they all embraced and shared was they had patience. They'd been through enough trials. They've seen enough hell in their life. They've been through enough difficult situations that they knew that all they had to do was give it time and wait on the Lord. I can speak to my dad and talk with my mother, and I used to talk with my big mama and Pawpaw all the time, and Aunt Dal and Uncle Blue. I would sit and soak up some of the things that they would say and talk about, and the one thing they would always tell me is let the Lord handle it. Let God do what God does, and you just wait. I always hated to hear that wait thing. Wait on the Lord. Wait. I've never been real good at waiting. But as I grow older, I realize that there are some problems, some issues that no matter how many words you say, how many times you pray, and praying is good. Always pray about it. Wise folks pray. But it doesn't matter how many gifts you send or how many phone calls you make. There are some things that you have to have patience and allow time to do its thing. Have you been rushing through some things, trying to repair a relationship that it takes patience and time to repair? Have you been wanting God to do something overnight that it took you 10 years to mess up? Be patient. Wisdom yields patience, the wise man said. If you are wise, you understand the effects of time. Did you know that time has a way of healing wounds? It's amazing some of the offenses that you've committed against folk, and some that other folk have committed against you. That only time can erase them. Time and prayer allows you to get over some things. And let me tell you how it works. You ever been hurt and angry and upset about something your dad did or that somebody said against you or whatever happens, and here you are holding that offense against that person, holding it against your brother or your friend or your wife or your husband, mother or father, whoever it may be. You've been holding this offense, something they did to you, something that was you felt so bad, so foul, they shouldn't have done that to me. And you had a good right to do it. In your mind, you felt like it was the right thing to do. They disrespected you, or they didn't honor the commitment they made. And you hold that offense against them, and it festers in your spirit, and you don't call them, you don't want to talk to them, you don't want to hear their voice. But then all of a sudden, you find yourself in a similar situation, that the one that closely emulates the one that you've been so angry about. You find yourself in the exact same situation, but in a different scenario, and you're having to deal with that thing on your own. And there are some folk who feel about you the same way you felt about the person that offended you. Time begins to work. You begin to have a different frame of mind, a thought about what happened. You begin to replay these things in your mind. That thing that was so bad now has come into your house and now is playing out in your life. And so now you have a different perspective about it. Wisdom, time, and patience. And now you're able to go back and forgive that person who has offended you. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. Your dad, your mother and father got divorced, and your daddy walked out on your mama, and you held it against him for years, and you struggled with it because you didn't have a father in your life, and you it hurt, you struggled with it, and your relationship was damaged for years. You had a difficult time even having conversations with your father, because you missed so much time, and your life ain't the same. You feel it would be much better if he had just stayed. But now you find yourself with children that you fathered, that you haven't had a great relationship with either. The same scenario that played out with your dad is doing nearly the same thing in your life. And now you're having to seek forgiveness from a child that you abandoned because you had him at a young age. You're seeking to repair the relationship. You watch that child have to forgive you and come back and love you even when you wasn't a great dad to them. Doesn't that give you a better perspective on how to deal with the abandonment that you felt because your father left? Wisdom, patience. Wisdom yields patience. When we learn to wait on God, when we learn to forgive because of the things that we go through, we learn to forgive other folk. We learn to release those things that have hurt us because we've had to release some things where other folks we've hurt some other folk. We've had to release that too. When we learn to do that, then we begin to learn how powerful time and patience and prayer really is. The author goes on to write that it is to one's glory to overlook an offense. Man, I tell you, it's one thing that's always troubled me is to overlook somebody's offense. For some reason, when we overlook an offense, we feel like it makes us weak and vulnerable. Many of us feel like it makes us ignorant when we forget about that thing you did to me. But what happens when you forget what someone does to you, has done to you? When you forgive what they've done to you, it allows you to begin to grow and mature in your own wisdom. Listen now, it takes wisdom and patience to even overlook an offense. The only reason I can overlook something that you've done to me is because I've done some of the same stuff to some other folk. If we would just remember that we are not always innocent, we've done some things that are horrible to some other folk, and we've asked God to wash us and forgive us. How dare us do I go and hold that against somebody else because that person has done something to me? That don't make sense to me. We've got to learn to overlook an offense. There's a story in the Bible where this manager, this man owed the king a lot of money. I don't remember the exact amount, but he owed the king a lot of money. And Jesus tells the parable that this man went before the king, and the king was going to take he and his family and take all of his possessions and throw them in jail and take everything that he had. The man pleaded with the king to give him time. Please give me time to pay it. The king had mercy on the servant and said, I tell you what, I'm going to forgive all that you owed. Just go home. I'm gonna wipe it clean. You are forgiven, and there your debt is paid. Jesus tells the story that this man goes back and he finds a servant that owes him money. A poor man that owed him money. He takes all that the man has and throws the man into jail, persecutes him. Jesus says that the king got word of it. The king was so upset that he had the man thrown in prison. Because how dare you be forgiven of a great debt? I wiped away all that you had. The greatest debt that you had, I wiped it away. And this man owed you pennies compared to what you owed me. And you couldn't forgive him. Man, that closely emulates all of our lives. Sometimes we hold people responsible for things that they've done, but we want God to forgive us for things that we've done to other folk. And it's not right. The Bible says that wisdom yields patience, and it is to one's glory to overlook an offense. You know, every now and again, we have to learn to overlook the offense of other folk. It's not easy. It is a practice that you have to work on daily. It's not going to happen overnight. But I promise, as you begin to grow in your wisdom and your patience, you will start seeing some of these things that really irritated you and made you mad back years ago. You start overlooking those. You realize that people live their lives in cycles, and they do things just like in seasons. It seems like some people make the same mistakes around the same time every single year. Just watch, folk. Watch them. They have the same emotional cycle, the same love cycle. You'll see they call you at certain times of the year, oh, I love someone. And then 2 months later, they done fell out again. It just goes over and over. You ever seen somebody live their life like that? I tell you, we have to learn that there are some offenses we just have to overlook because it's a part of a person's nature. Stop trying to change that person and learn to forgive them, because God has to deal with them just like he dealt with you. Be blessed. Endure through all your trials and know that God is with you.